Hello, everyone. Hi. My name is Christine Terme. I'm one of the two farmers at Eureka Organic Farm here in Springfield, up on Eureka Road, just past the Humane Society. Anybody knows where that is? I see we've got a couple of CSA members here, which is really exciting for us. So Eureka Organic Farm is an organic vegetable farm. Where are you going? Okay. And we do community-supported agriculture, which is kind of like a vegetable subscription program where you pay at the start of the season and then you can pick up your vegetables all throughout the summer. Now, my husband and I have been growing since 2012, but we moved to Vermont in 2022, so we're pretty new to the area, but we're meeting a lot of community members and having a lot of fun here. All right, so who here has started seeds before? Most people. Yeah, okay. Who here has felt successful at it? A couple of people. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, right? Like, you feel like you could learn more, right? Yeah. Okay. A couple seeds. All right, so before we get into what is a seed, I wanted to talk about some of the different types of seed starting situations that you can have at home. So you can start your seeds indoors with no special equipment, just a pot on a windowsill, right? You can start your seeds indoors with a lot of special equipment, so like a pot on a heat mat or under a heat lamp under fluorescent lights or like in a little greenhouse type situation. You can start your seeds outside with a lot of special equipment, so that would be an outside greenhouse. For us, we have heat mats. Some people have heated greenhouses. And then you could start your seeds outside with no special equipment, so that's just starting your seeds in the ground. There's also something called winter sown, where you start your seeds in a small container. A lot of people use milk jugs. That'd be like a miniature greenhouse outside, but I consider that no special equipment because you're just kind of throwing your seeds down. Okay? Does anybody start their seeds inside? Does anybody? Yeah? Do you all have special equipment? Yeah? The light setup, fans, heat mats? Yeah, they're not back there. They're like, yeah. All right. Great. Okay, so let's talk about what is a seed. When I made this, I picked a sunflower seed, and the best description that I have ever heard of what is a seed is a baby in a box with its lunch. Okay? So the baby is the baby plant, the box is the seed, and the lunch is the nutrients that it needs in order to get started growing. So it sends out a radicle, which is the first root, and then it sends out two leaves called cotyledons. That's the baby plant. Now, the size of the seed can tell us a lot of things. So the bigger the seed is, the deeper you want to plant it. And right here I say you should plant the seed 2.5 times the depth, or 2.5 times the width of the seed. That's approximate. I don't go around measuring my seeds, particularly like kale seeds, which are this big, the size of specks of dust. But typically what you do is you plant it, I have these depths 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and then 3/4 to an inch. So the size of the seed tells you how deep you want to plant it, and also how big your plant is going to grow and how fast it's going to grow. So a sunflower seed grows really fast compared to, again, we're going to go with a broccoli seed. Okay? So that's really important, and you can see that. Right, I have here, these are just some seeds that I saved from a squash that we ate. But these are like a winter squash type of seed, kind of like a butternut squash. This is huge. This is so big. Your baby has a lot of lunch in this seed. Right? But then these are some seeds from a tomato. Right, and these are tiny. You can't even see that. And that's not even the smallest seed that I've ever seen, right? Everybody knows what a tomato seed looks like, but they're tiny compared to these seeds. Okay. So you know right off the bat that you're going to be planting your butternut squash way deep compared to these tomato seeds. If you plant your tomato seeds too deep, they're not going to have the energy to grow through the soil. So where do you all get your seeds? Does anybody want to volunteer?
Everywhere. Everywhere. We've got 7 catalogs at home.
Right? And they just send them to you. So you all order them online, okay? Does anybody go shopping locally for their seeds? like Bibbins, sort of, like kind of, the co-op has some, grocery store, the dollar store has a bunch. Erskine's, yeah, that's great. Does anybody save their own seeds? Yeah, some, yeah, it's a hit or miss a lot with saving your own seeds. I've stolen some from the library's garden, right out front. They've got some really great echinacea seeds out there. And then, and then there's also such a thing as a seed library. So the library has seeds for you to take, and then you grow the plants, and then you can bring your seeds back after after a full season, right? So this library has a kind of a small seed library. Thank you. The Weathersfield Public Library has a huge seed catalog, and what they do is they've gotten donations of last year's seeds from like Baker Creek, which is kind of a big seed company. And so if anybody needs free seeds, go to Weathersfield. Just go, and they'll give them away, and they will hand you like a shopping bag, and you can just pick up all your seeds. Okay. Wow. Yeah. They're dying to get rid of them. They said they threw away so many last year. So I told them I would plug them. Okay. So back to the size of the seed. So the size of the seed. Oh, hi, welcome. Hi, I'm Kristen. The size of the seed will also tell you how big of a plant pot that you need to use, right? Because you're not going to want to plant that giant seed into a teeny tiny little, like, itty bitty little pot, something of this size. You're going to want to plant it bigger because it's going to be a bigger plant and it's going to go through the nutrients in the soil a lot faster. So there's all sorts of different sizes of pots that you can use. And you don't have to buy them. I buy them because I like my things standardized, and I grow probably 1,500 trays like this size every year, right? So I like them to be the same size. But you can make your own. You can make them out of newspaper using a jar. You can scavenge these little trays that everybody gets, when they buy their plants at Bibbins or wherever. Yeah. So you just want to match the size of your plant to the size of your seed, or the size of your pot to the size of your seed. Because, as I said, the plant will go through the nutrients in your soil really fast. So if you're taking a look at this handout that I have here, and talk about the different types of seeds, and I say to fertilize when you see the first true leaves right here. And that's because your plant is using up the nutrients. First of all, it used up the nutrients in its box, right? It used up the nutrients in its seed, but then it's going to use up the nutrients in the soil really fast. So you want to give them just a little bit of extra something. You can buy organic fertilizer, you can buy non-organic fertilizer, you can make your own fertilizer out of banana peels and coffee grounds and eggshells, like ground up. So it's really easy to feed your plants, okay? Seed starting does not have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be picture perfect. You can sit there and I could probably make like 200 of these in an hour because it takes no time at all. But it's a really accessible and easy way to get started. All right. And then in order to plant, in addition to the plant pot that you have, I didn't talk about soil blockers. Does anybody know what a soil blocker is? Does anybody use it? Yeah? Anybody else?
My mom bought one, and I'm so curious about it.
Yeah.
How does the soil stay together if it's just sitting there? Is my big question.
It is just sitting there, yeah. Let's see. So this is a soil blocker, this right here. And what this is hollow on the inside, and you get your bucket of soil and you moisten the soil. That's how it stays together. And then you basically just mash the soil into the underside of that thing, and then you squeeze the handle and it mashes it more and presses it down, and then you have 4 cubes of soil, just soil, and you can plant your seed in there. You need to bottom water, otherwise they fall apart. And so bottom watering is when you put them in a tray of water, put the water in, and then the soil absorbs it from the bottom, basically is what that is, okay? Great. And then in addition to the plant pots, you also need the soil. And again, you can use soil from your backyard. That's fine. If you buy a seed starting mix, you're going to get sterile soil, so you can be sure that there's no fungal diseases or bacteria in your soil. That's the benefit of using a seed starting mix. It's also really light compared to, like, you might have clay soil at home, right? And so that would, everybody knows what clay is, but like water just sits on it. not really conducive to growing seeds. Yeah. So I just shown some different seed starting mixes. This is just images from Google. I have no affiliation. Like, I'm always going to tell you buy organic because we grow organic, but do what works for your budget. Do what works for you. And then you pack it into your plant pot. And then you make your little hole, and then you put in your seed. And look, you just planted something. Amazing. Okay? Let's see here. So I think what I'm going to do is plant something for you so we can all see what we've got here. So you just put the soil in. Now is not the time to be really gentle because you want to give them as much nutrients as possible in here. So like if I just put my finger in here and it went all the way down to the bottom. That's not enough soil. That's not enough soil for your plant. It's going to go through that really quickly. There's probably going to be voids in the soil when you're growing your seed, and so there's like pockets of air that leaves your plant susceptible to heat and cold because the air will heat up faster than the soil, and then your plant will suffer a little bit. So when you plant in your plant pot, really pack it in there. You want to make sure that it's nice and firm, okay? Not so firm that you can't get your finger in. A little bit of trial and error, but you want to do that just like that. Plant's going to be really upset. And if I were to pack this down by having it loose, now I've got ½ inch of space in between the top layer of soil and the top of the pot. Right. Put it up to the top. Okay? Yeah. So you want to make sure you're giving your plant the best possible chance that you can. And so that's why we fill it as full as possible. Just pack it down. You can grow it on your windowsill. You can grow it in a special setup with the lights, which is really helpful. And so on this handout that I have here, I've shown you what it's like to grow it with lights. You want to keep the lights as close to the plant as possible once the plant emerges. And that prevents your plant from getting leggy. Has anybody here heard that term? Experienced that term like all of the time, right? Yeah. I brought some plants from my own house, which are incredibly leggy. And these are plants that me and my daughter planted. I'm no good at taking care of plants in the house, God knows why. Out of the house is fine, but not in the house. So, does anybody not know what leggy means? Yeah. Okay, great. So
leggy, it doesn't grow?
No, leggy, it does grow.
Oh.
But it grows really tall and skinny and not very strong, which is why this plant is sort of like bobbling.
Okay.
Right? You want your plant to be chunky. You want it to be thick and healthy, like a really fat baby. And this plant also, like, look at how tall this stem is right here, all the way up until the first leaf. And this one, same here. These are so leggy because they're stretching for the light. So that's the purpose of keeping your plants, your lights down really close. And so if you're just growing on your windowsill, you're going to face this. I mean, it's incredibly hard for a plant to become not leggy just by growing on a windowsill. Okay, you can still do it. It's just that your plants, you'll need to take a little bit of extra care of your plants. So these are really leggy. You can also see like the leaves are almost losing color. This poor plant has been growing since September. And it's only this tall because it's not getting what it needs in my house. And this one we just planted March 1st. And this is a pie pumpkin seed. And even though this looks really good and it looks pretty chunky, I can already tell this is too tall. And some of this is like, you won't know this until you've grown some of your plants, right? And you've seen how they're supposed to look. But I already know this is too tall. And even though I'm rotating it every day, this one needs help. They both need help.
Where did you have that one?
Also on the windowsill.
Okay.
Yeah, south-facing windowsill, as warm as you could get, with as much light as you could get, but they're just not getting enough light. That's all. And you're going to face that every time, right? It's not you. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just the plants don't get what they need in a house. So there is a benefit to starting your plants under light. But again, you can still remedy this. Like for example, tomatoes. If you wanted to help this plant, it's just so sad. But if you wanted to help this plant, tomatoes, they have hairs all along their stems because those will turn into roots. So I could take off all of the leaves, even up to just here, which is the growing point, and this could be a whole step, and then I could bury this. You don't have to dig a 1-foot hole in order to bury this in the ground. I could dig like a 4-inch hole and lay it down, and it will grow roots all along where the stem is touching the soil. Right? So it's not such a big deal to have leggy tomato plants. It'll cost you you maybe an extra week of growing time before your plants will recover, a week or two. But you can still do it, it's fine. Okay. This one is a little harder. I would try to get this one like in a greenhouse as soon as possible. So, but the nice part about cucurbits, which is like cucumbers, winter squash, summer squash, is that they only need 2 weeks in the house, really, until they're ready to plant. So like, if it was warm enough, I could just plant this outside. It's not warm enough, it's gonna die if you put it outside. Don't start your cucurbits. It's a really common setup. You get like a bookshelf, metal or plastic bookshelf, and you have fluorescent lights on the underside of each shelf, and then you put your plants on the shelf and you can raise and lower the lights. Is this making sense? Like I can see it clearly.
Yeah, I was envisioning like a chain or something on a hook that you would just move.
I think what I would do is like put books underneath my plants so that way I don't have to futz with the light. But then you worry about your books. But, yeah.
Is there any particular type of light you need to use?
So there are such a thing as grow lights. You can also use full spectrum fluorescent lights, and your plants will still be missing a little bit, but the idea is that your plants will take as little time as possible in your house, and then you plant them as soon as possible outside so they can get what they need from the sun.
Like these LED lights that you can get that are adjustable, is there like a particular frequency you want to set those to?
I honestly wouldn't use, I would try full spectrum. Like you want the ones that look like sunlight. You want the ones that look as much like natural light as possible. So that way your plants get as much of what they need
We
inside.
have the LED ones, they're not as good as using the regular actual grow lights or the.
Yeah.
But for power bill wise and just ease of use, like they work okay.
Yeah. I think if you're gonna start with lights, I think what I would do is plant as late as possible in your house, and that way your plants will be outside that much sooner, getting their sunlight.
And how many hours a day are you having, like, do you replicate?
You try to
nature?
replicate it, yeah.
Okay.
You don't want your lights on full time.
Right.
Plants need at least 6 hours of darkness in order to grow properly, because the seed actually grows at night. And so what it does is it takes in the nutrients during the day, and then it uses those dark hours in order to send out new roots and in order to stretch a little bit further. So you need 6 hours of night. And do you have a question? You just
No, I'm sorry.
It's good. I don't want to stretch away. Okay. And so I've sort of shown that here with these two like goofy little pictures of lights. But another thing that you can do in order to help this situation with this poor tomato plant is put a fan on your plants, and that actually stimulates the stem to grow thicker. Right? You could also wiggle your plants like this. I do this all the time. It's compulsive. Or you could, if you have a tray like this, you could just run your hands over the stems, right? And that's helpful to them. But a fan is really, because I'm not going to do this for an hour. It's just fun. So, a fan is really going to help your plants grow. It'll also help decrease some of that legginess, right? So that's helpful.
But only an hour.
Yeah, if you don't want to do it forever, because then your plants will be like, oh my God, I live in a gale. Like, I live in a hurricane. And they won't grow. So.
Unfortunately, until I read that, have them on the same timer as the lights. So
Oh.
as soon as I get home, last year's onions were really leggy and said, we need to have a fan on them.
Yeah.
But not for
Not
18
forever.
hours.
No, not forever.
Right.
Just 1 to 2 hours, I would say. So that works out there. And there are such a thing as timers, as this gentleman uses, and they can help you turn on your lights on and off, and your fan on and off, and you can get them pretty cheap. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the cotyledon stage, which everybody can see on your handout. I used to pronounce that word like cotyledon. It's not a dinosaur. I really wish it was, but it's cotyledon. And it's the first true leaves. These are the leaves that are already formed in your seed, right here. And they most generally don't look like the true leaves of the plant. So this is a squash, and a squash has really big, big leaves like this. They look like a weird maple leaf, basically, big and green. And so they're just babies. But usually when you want to transplant into a bigger pot or transplant outside, your plant has at least one set of true leaves. which this is just not a good. Yeah, I don't have any plants with true leaves except for my onions here, which are still red. But that's a really good indicator for when to take your plant out of this little pot and put it into the ground, is if it has a first set of true leaves. Another really good indicator is to pick up your plant like this and pull it and see if the entire root ball comes out. Can everybody see what I'm doing right here?
Yeah.
And so it's really loose. It's not quite where it needs to be. So if I was unsure if this was cotyledon stage or not, that's also another good way to tell if it's ready to plant or not. And the reason that's so is because the roots have spread throughout the entire soil block and they're using up all of the nutrients, so you just need to give it more. You can hold a plant in a little tray like this or in a little pot like this with some spray-on fertilizer. Foliar fertilizer is what we call it, where you just put it in a spray bottle and you spray it. But it's not going to be forever. Your plant's not going to enjoy this forever.
Is there a certain temperature the soil should be when you transplant them outside?
Yes. So for most plants, they're going to want to be planted after the last frost, and that's when your soil temperature is most likely 50 degrees or above. Some plants don't need that. Some plants can germinate or grow just fine in cold temperatures. Peas are a notable example. Everybody loves snap peas, and maybe not everybody loves garden peas, but it's the same plant. Yeah, but you could put your peas in right now, and if it snows, they'll be fine. But you can't do that with peppers. They'll just rot in the soil. So it depends on the type of plant. And I wanted to point out to you here, so I'm on the Johnny's website right now. We purchase a lot of our seeds from Johnny's Seeds, which is a seed company in Maine. It's a co-op company. It's owned by their employees. And they have a lot of organic stuff, they have a lot of non-organic stuff, and also their plants have excellent germination rates, and that's more important to me than just about everything else right now. So that's why we buy most of our stuff from Johnny's. They're meant for commercial growers, but they have stuff that's interesting for non-commercial growers. And so I'm scrolling down here to this important information over here. I've got days to maturity right here. And you can see right here the germination guide up at the top. At what temperature they're going to germinate the best. Okay? So most plants, the seeds like to germinate in between 70 and 80 degrees. And then down here, underneath this transplanting section, it tells you when to start. So this is about 5 to 6 weeks before your last frost. And so that way you know this is not going to be a plant that you want to plant outside right now. Okay? This is the important information. So like it's really fun to start the seeds and put them in the trays and put them in the pots and make the pots and get your hands in the dirt. But this is the important part. This is the part that's going to help you plan your garden and figure out when you can start and when you can plant. And also, if you're interested in growing, like, I want lettuce, and then you grow your one batch of lettuce and it's ready a month later, and then you don't have any lettuce anymore for the rest of the summer. So this will tell you how often you need to start your seeds so that you can use some every 2 weeks or some every 4 weeks, and you'll get like successions of lettuce to make sure that you have enough to last all summer. Okay? So this is the important information. You want to make sure that you have all of this taken care of. We use a spreadsheet. I know it's everybody's favorite thing. This is our crop plan for you. This is my farm. I could hand this to another farmer and they could grow exactly what we're growing, and they could grow it in the way that we're growing it, because this has all of the information here. So let's scroll down to tomatoes because they're my favorites. Right here. So I have the seeding date. This is the date. This is 5 to 6 weeks before the last frost. That's next week. You could start your tomatoes right now. You might already have started your tomatoes. Okay.
Trying not to.
Right. And then my spreadsheet automatically calculates the transplanting date. I have the 15th of May. The last frost is generally the 22nd of May in this area, but I'm putting mine in a greenhouse, so they're going to have a little bit of extra time. Sorry, Grandma. You got really excited there. Yep. And then I have the days to maturity here. So this is when I know that I'm going to be able to harvest my tomatoes. 70 days. And I have the date right next to that. So, but what I wanted to show you was this program that I learned about called Seed Time, that one of my friends told me about. And this will create for you a seeding calendar. And so what you do along one side is you set up which crops you're going to grow. It even has a varietal name. So like if you're growing, I don't know, what's a really famous tomato? Like a Cherokee Purple tomato, you can look up Cherokee Purple tomato and enter it right over here. And it will calculate all of that stuff for you. And it will put it on this calendar for you, which is really cool. And it tells you when to seed it, and it tells you when to transplant it, and it tells you when to hoe it, and it tells you when to do all this cool stuff. So there are tools out there that will help you plan your stuff. And you don't have to do it absolutely, you just wing it, right? Seeds are really forgiving. Plants are really forgiving. They're going to like it. They're just going to like being in the ground no matter what. But this is really important too if you want to have your crops spaced out evenly throughout the summer so that you know when something is happening and when it's not. Okay? So the seed time is really important, and Johnny Seeds is really important. I have not found other seed companies that have this amount of information, right, for their seeds. Like High Mowing doesn't do it. High Mowing is a Vermont seed company. They're really great. They do only organic seeds. And I'm really pleased with them because they have good germination rates as well. But they don't tell you all of this information. You can't look it up. Same with Baker Creek, which is, Baker Creek just sort of like throws the seeds at you and then you're done. Right? So if you get seeds from somewhere, just go to the Johnny's website. And you want this information, just go to the Johnny's website and look up something approximate. And you'll get that information. That's going to be really important for you. All right. Does anybody grow flowers? Does anybody like a flower here? Oh, lots of you. Great. Are you growing perennials? Are you growing annuals? Kind of things? Yeah, perennials? Both? Yeah. Flowers defy most of the rules for vegetable seeding. There are lots of flowers that need to have complete and total darkness for germination. And then there's lots of flowers that need to have sunlight on the seeds for germination. So, and you need to surface sow them, right? You just need to sprinkle them along the soil in order to get them to go. And it's hard to know which is which. You sort of have to look that up. Johnny's will tell you that some of it. There's also other companies. I got this one in the mail. This is called Prairie Moon Nursery. They do a lot of prairie plants and plants that will help your naturalization and everything along those lines. But they have some charts in here, like they will tell you which plants need light and which plants don't need light and everything along those lines. So if you're growing flowers, make sure you look this up. Make sure you look up which plants need what, because you will be very, very sad otherwise if your seeds don't germinate. And also flowers need a lot of cold stratification. Is anybody familiar with cold stratifying? No. So some plants need cold temperatures for at least 30 days in order to grow. Some seeds do. This is really common in flowers and some herbs. And so I'm trying to grow Rosa rugosa this year. That's the beach rose, the really big, like it has a really big rose hip. And so what I did was I put this out in the beginning of February and I sprinkled my rose seeds on it and I just left it on my front stoop. And I've got some holes in the top and some holes in the bottom to make sure that it can drain properly. And I'm just trying to forget about it so that my rose seeds will stratify. So it's important to know as much information as you can about your particular type of seed in order to get it to start. I want you all to be successful, and so that's why the information is important. Okay, I think that's all I had planned here. I did want to show you how to make these goofy little newspaper pots because, as I said, you don't have to spend money in order to make them. And that's important, I think, especially if you're just starting out. It's so nice not to have to go out and buy everything. So this is just our weekly newspaper, and I have a jar. It's perfectly straight. That's the important part. And you put the open side of the jar towards the bottom of the pot, and then you just roll it, and you tuck the ends of the pot into the open side of the jar, and then you flip the jar over and squish down the inside, and now I have a plant pot. Okay? And you can make bigger plant pots using bigger jars, right? This is a half pint jar, this is the size of the pot that it comes in. This would be really good for my pie pumpkin, right? And you can do even bigger, you can use drinking glasses. But this is really easy to do. And it's, it's not like the prettiest thing in the world, and it's got this goofy bit, but it'll work. It'll work for 8 weeks until it's time to plant it. And then once it's time to plant it, let's do this.
Doesn't watering kind of break it down though?
It will start to break it down, yeah, but
But
over
it
8
will
weeks, yeah, not a problem. So you got your soil in here, you've got your seed in here, and when it comes time to plant it, I would just open up this bottom. Because the plant's roots are not super strong, you want to give them the best chance of survival. Even though the newspaper will be wet, you want to make sure this bottom's open so that at least some of the roots can get out and get into the soil where they need to grow. So, and then you can just leave the newspaper in the ground, it'll biodegrade, it'll be fine. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Do we want to talk about individual seed setups? Is there
What
anything?
starter mix do you use? That's Eureka?
So this is something from a company called Moo. Vermont Natural Agricultural Products is, I think, the legal name. And then this is called their Moo Mix. I have found this not to be super great for us. It doesn't have a lot of fertility in it. And a lot of times my seeds get to this level. This is just the cotyledon stage right here. These are peppers, right? And then they'll start to turn yellow already. Right, so that means that this is low in nitrogen. Either that or I'm watering too much, but I would assume that it's low in nitrogen. And so I will need to fertilize these sooner than I would normally, okay? But I like Vermont compost. That's the one with the donkey on the front. That's like the ideal. It's super expensive, but it's expensive for a reason. Coast of Maine is also a really good one. That one's on the handout here. Coast of Maine, I've used that before. I've had people who have had a lot of good success with the Miracle Grow starting mix. I would suggest using organic, as always, but again, it works, whatever's in your budget, whatever works for you. You have one, okay. And so, yeah, there's certain ones that I would stay away from, but only because I know, and I've had experience growing with them. And we try to use as many local products as possible, so that's why we stuck with Moo, and we're going to be ordering from Vermont Compost this year. Anybody else?
Yeah,
You first.
Okay, how much lighting do you add to it in the beginning? I mean, if it's a seed, then is it a 6-hour, 10-hour, 8-hour, 12-hour?
So if it's a vegetable seed, you don't need any light at first until it pops. And I keep going back to this, but you can see how some of these are starting to pop right here. They've got their seed husks on the stem, but they don't have their leaves yet. As soon as they have their leaves, you got to turn on the light.
Okay, but how long? Because you don't want to pay for lighting that you don't need.
You want to turn it on 16 to 18 hours a day.
Oh, put it up.
Yeah. You want to mimic that natural sunlight as fast as you possibly can, because these can get leggy even at this stage, right? So here it is with the seed husk on it. I would turn it on right now if I was on this inside. I'm really lucky to be able to grow this outside, so I don't have to worry about the lights.
Now, is leggy because it's not close enough to the light, or it's just not enough daylight hours?
So it will be leggy, if you're indoors, it will be leggy because it's not close enough to the light, and the light is not providing all of the nutrients that it needs. Right. And so we all know that light bulbs don't give sunlight,
No.
right? But your plants especially need that. That's how they eat. So, okay. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay, great. In the back?
So you talked about tomato plants when they're leggy, you can plant those like sideways. What other plants vegetables can you do that with?
You can do that a little bit with your cucurbits, which again, these are the winter squash, the summer squash, the cucumbers. They do have the hairs on their stems, but I wouldn't suggest it with most plants. I would say if you're a beginner, if you're just trying it, pretty much just do it with tomatoes.
How about like broccoli?
Not even with broccoli. Yeah. You have leggy broccoli?
I did. Last year, and I knew you could do that with tomato plants, so I did that with broccoli. It seems like it when it's real leggy, it kind of falls down, and then it seemed like it started growing and started growing up. So,
Great, I love that for you.
yeah, I was just wondering if that's typical of other things besides tomatoes.
There are a lot of plants where if you bury them, if you bury the stem and they're not tomatoes, they'll just die. So to be safe, I would say just tomatoes, and then like try not to have leggy broccoli this year. Oh, you know what we didn't talk about is, did I answer your question? Did you have one? Okay.
That's it.
What we didn't talk about is hardening off your plants. You all familiar with this term? I know you guys are nodding, you're so brave back there. All right. So when it's time to plant your plants and they've been in your house, you cannot just take these plants and put them in the ground outside. They will die. Okay? And that's because they're not used to the wind, unless you're putting a fan on them. Right? And they're also not used to the harshness of the sunlight. So you need to get them used to that over the span of anywhere from 3 days to a week, basically. So what you can do is you can take your plants in and out, which is kind of a pain in the butt. If you, if you're bad at remembering that sort of thing, it's kind of a pain in the butt. But you take them, like you put them out for an hour the first day, and then you put them out for 3 hours the next day, and then you put them out for 5 hours the next day, and then they're fine. And then the fourth day you can plant them. And you just want to make sure you're giving them all of the water that they need when you're hardening them off. Another thing that you can do is you can put them in partial shade and then just leave them there for a day and then move them the next day to slightly more sun and then the next day to slightly more sun. The idea is you don't want them to cope with all of the things at once. You don't want them to cope with wind plus sun plus lack of water plus the cold temperatures all at once. So you get them used to a couple of those things, and then they're more able to adapt to the outside environment rather than the inside environment. And so what we do at the farm is they go from our greenhouse to a cold frame outside, which is a fancy word for a table, and I just make sure I water them, and that's it. That's how I harden off my plants. And I leave them there for about a week just to make sure that they're okay, and then they'll go in the ground. Every time you plant a plant in the ground, it undergoes transplant shock. And it's going to take a few extra days to a few extra weeks to recover. Yeah, and so on the days to maturity that we talked about, which you can't see anyway on the screen, so it says that a Prudence purple tomato is 56 days to maturity. 56 days from the moment that you plant it in the soil until the moment that the tomato is ready to harvest. That's what it says. But I plant mine in a greenhouse, and I know that when I put it in the ground, it takes 2 weeks for my plant to recover. And so that 56 quickly becomes 70 days. And so now I have to plan for that when I'm starting my seeds and when I want them to be ready and everything along those lines. If you have a healthy plant, it's going to recover from transplant shock a lot faster. This one is not going to this one is not going to recover for at least 2 weeks. This is a really sad plant. But if you plant it at the right time, then it will maybe take 4 days to recover, and you'll start to see the new growth after 4 or 5 days, which is really great. And so that's one of the other reasons why you don't want to start your plants too early, because the longer they stay in the plant pot, the more stressed they get. The roots go around and around in the plant pot, and have a hard time breaking out of that cycle in order to get into the soil. So the less time that you can keep your plant in the house or in your seed starting setup, the better off your plant is going to be. And I have done it where I have had plants slightly bigger than these peppers, and I've planted them at the same time as plants as big as this, and a month later they were the same size, because the ones that were this size were so much healthier than the ones that were this size. They were not undergoing the same amount of stress. So hardening off is really important. Yeah.
So what if you end up, you just go to plant stuff and you find it is totally, the roots are just totally bound up? Like, what's the best thing? Like, I've seen people cut them off entirely or just wiggle them loose. Like, what do you do when, does that happen to you?
Yeah, it happens all the time. Especially if I'm growing these tiny little seed trays. Like, these are small little pots over here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it depends on the plant, which I hate to say, but I think for the most part, if you're planting a squash or a cucumber, don't touch the roots, even if it's root bound. If it's root bound, it's probably already half dead anyway. Okay? But if it's any other plant, you take it out of the the plant pot, and then I just tear off the bottom like 1/8 to 1/4 inches of roots. Because if you let it go like that, they'll continue to grow in a circle, and they'll get all intertwined, and then your plant won't have enough roots going out and getting more nutrients for it. So yeah, rip it off unless it's cucurbit. Don't do that.
Okay.
Try not to touch the cucurbit roots as much as possible. They will hate you. Yes. And that's one of the benefits where the soil blocker comes into play. So let's go back to the soil blocker. So this, it will air prune the roots for you. I'm curious about what this video is.
This is Growing Wisdom. We are here today with Anthony Stevenson, and we are at Johnny Selected Seeds in Albion, Maine, and you're going to talk about starting seeds and starting them a little bit easier for folks at home or commercial growers, right?
That's correct.
Tell me a little bit about this block maker tool.
Well, Dave, it's actually 4 compartments, and this is made of galvanized metal. You fill each compartment up with the soil, and you use it just like a cookie cutter to make 4 little blocks of soil to plant your seeds in.
That's really cool, and it's got these little divots.
You can just plant the seed directly in there in the hole. You cover them up, you just water it gently, and then you can transplant this directly outside. There's no transplant shock. There is no container to throw away, to store. It just goes directly into the ground.
And as the seeds come up and start growing through here, will they outgrow the little block?
Actually, what's different about these is they don't become root bound. When the root reaches the edge, there's an air barrier there. It'll actually stop and wait for it to become transplanted. If you were in a container, it would wrap around and become root bound.
So is this just dirt I took out?
But I think that's a really good way of showing the benefit of something like a soil blocker versus something like these little plants, is because there's an air gap around all 5 sides, I guess, or 6 sides of your block, your soil block. So the roots won't try to grow and they won't keep searching. They'll just stop. So you don't have to worry so much about that root bound that happens. You just pick up the cube and you put it in a hole in the soil. Yeah. There's a lot of trial and error with these soil blockers. So if you get one, let us know how it goes.
First year using it, and so far only 1 square fell apart.
Oh, nice.
I think I was just beginner's luck. So the question I have is, how do you fertilize them too? Do you bottom fertilize them also?
So I would still foliar feed them, which is putting your fertilizer into a spray bottle and spraying the top of the plant. You don't have to put the fertilizer on the soil when you're feeding your plants in your greenhouse or in your house or anything along those lines. If it's wet, like if your fertilizer is wet, you can just spray it onto the leaves themselves and the leaves will absorb it. Foliar feeding also helps with preventing like fungal disease and infection. So you can we use fish fertilizer, which is like ground up pulverized fermented fish guts.
In the house?
Not in the house.
That's the question I have.
Yes. What I would do if I was foliar feeding in the house is I would brew up some banana skins with coffee grounds and eggshells, and then I would strain it and put it in a spray bottle and spray it, and then I'd keep that in the fridge.
Compost tea.
Yeah, compost, worm compost tea is also really good. Diluted, but yeah. Anyone?
So, it's a question I'm not even sure how to ask. By and large, we're pretty successful as far as vegetables go. There's a couple of them that we struggle with, but they're like broccoli that everybody struggles with. It's awful. But there's some seeds that I have yet to be capable of germinating. Like, lavender's never come up, echinacea's never come up. Like, those are the ones off the top of my head. Is there like a method to madness where, like, even if the back says it requires light or it requires darkness or whatever, like, we follow the directions on the back and it still does, like, is there some witchcraft that, like, you can do?
It does feel like magic when you're trying to start seeds, because they are the size of dust specks and then like a whole plant emerges. But there's no like, I'm not going to teach you to wave your wand or whatever over your...
But
yeah.
there's no like, well, if there's like this kind of, like, you're having a hard time germinating seeds, like, this is a thing you could do? Like,
No,
there's
'cause-
nothing like that?
No, because it depends on the seed.
I
And
thought
so lavender can take like 8 weeks to start germinating, right? And you just have this tray of dirt in your house for 8 weeks that you're trying to remember to keep wet.
But lavender, you can do cuttings too.
Lavender you can do cuttings, but if you don't have lavender, where are you going to get a cutting? I guess you could go like pinch a stem off of
Front of
Home
the
Depot or
library.
something. Yeah, right. They don't have any lemon. Yeah. You can try to see if your seeds will like to be scarified. Are you familiar with that term?
Like scratching things?
Yeah, that's right. So you can scratch your seeds, and basically what you're doing is forming a nick in the seed coating, and that will allow water to penetrate more and activate the baby inside. So some people, they'll take like a nail clipper and they'll just clip off the very edge right here. Some people, if you're using round seeds or small seeds, you put them in between 2 sheets of sandpaper and and then that's it. That'll scarify them, right? But again, you're still going to be waiting 8 weeks. You're still going to be waiting a long time.
And that's fine, like waiting, I didn't mind it when it sits in there for a whole summer and
Yeah,
and then it
that's-
starts to get moldy and algae legs, so then it's not fun.
Yeah. And you can also look up to see if they need to be cold stratified, because some of them, if it's too late, like it's almost too late to put my cold stratified seeds back outside and expect them to have enough cold, because it's been so warm lately. So what you could do is you could put this whole thing in your fridge for 30 days and just check it every couple of days, make sure it's not drying out. And then you'll have your cold stratified seeds, and you can put them like in your greenhouse or underneath your light setup or on your windowsill. Yeah,
And for it to count as stratification, it has to be moist.
it does
I
have to
spent
be
years
moist.
just putting seed packets in the fridge and wondering why that didn't work. And I just
Yeah.
recently
It does have to be
read
moist.
about them.
That's a really good point. Yep. You could also, if you don't want to have like a block of dirt in your fridge, you could put them in between 2 sheets of wet paper towel and put them in a plastic bag and put that in the fridge. You have to check that more often to make sure it doesn't dry out. But yeah, and that's also a really good way to do a germination test if you're using old seeds. Is everybody, some people are familiar with this term, some people are not. So if you're using old seeds, seeds are good. They're about, I would say like 3 years. And then after that, you get into really poor germination rates. You always want to see 100% germination rates with your seeds, but even a company like Johnny's is not going to have 100% germination. They'll say it's got 98 or it's got 90. With some of the ones like lavender, it's like 75, 65, right? And so if you have seeds and you want to see if they're still viable, if they will still sprout, what you can do is you can put them in between 2 sheets of wet paper towel, put them in a bag, put them in a warm spot, and then check them again like 5 days later and see if any are growing that radicle, that first root. And that's a really good way. I've got some seeds from 1998, from when my grandmother died. And that's how you check to see if they're still good. None of those are still good, by the way. None of those. And if you're following like seed starting news, you'll see that sometimes they'll like, we found this 2,000-year-old date palm seed, and we got it to sprout, right? It's because they're using like hormones and rooting hormones and growing hormones in order to help stimulate that poor little dead, well, it's not dead anymore, but that poor seed. So, so you don't need rooting hormones at home. You just need a paper towel and a Ziploc bag and like the top of your fridge.
Are you able to plant those once they sprouted like that?
Yes.
I've had terrible luck with actually getting them to survive
Yes.
that transition.
Yes, you have to be extra, extra careful because they're sending out their little root hair fibers into the paper towel. And so what I found is the best to do that is to cut out around the seed and plant the whole thing, paper towel and all, in the soil. And that way it can grow through the paper towel and it can get into the soil. And yeah, but I would still not expect a really high success rate with that. So if it's your last 10 seeds, maybe just don't do that. Yeah. Anybody?
Oh, heat mats. I'm talking about heat mats.
Let me check in here first, and then we'll come back to peanuts. And you had a question too.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I've heard for like, peat seeds that you should soak them first before putting them in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Is that necessary? And if so, how long?
So for things like pea seeds, you can soak them. You don't have to, but you can. And you soak them anywhere from 8 hours to 24 hours. And what that does is it breaks down the seed coating on the outside of the seed so that the water can penetrate and again awaken the little plant inside. But you don't have to. But it is helpful in certain instances. And there's pros and cons with either soaking it or not soaking it. So the pro with soaking it is that it will sprout faster. Okay? But the con is that you also have to be really diligent about making sure that soil is moist all of the time. Because if you let that soil dry out for the soaked seed, it will dry out the plant a lot faster. Okay? Yeah, but it is helpful. There's also such a thing as inoculant for legumes, right? And that's basically just like fungus dust. So you soak your pea seeds and then you put them in a bag with the fungus dust and then you plant them, and that will help them grow faster as well. So you're basically just giving them a better chance of survival, but you can do it without it and you can still be successful. Yes, you.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to know, like, when you store your seeds that you harvested from your plants, what's the best way to store them through the winter so they don't mold and all of that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the best way to store your seeds is in the driest place you can find. And it's better if it's dry and cool versus dry and warm, but the dryness is more important than the temperature of the place that you're storing them. Okay? So I store these in a plastic bag. As you saw with my tomatoes, I just made like a notebook paper seed packet, and that is also fine. It doesn't have to be airtight. It just has to be in a place that's dry, in a place that's also safe from rodents. So these are really attractive to rodents, these ones in particular. Humans also like to eat these. But yeah, the dryness is what's important. Okay. So back to heat mats. Okay, what's your question about heat mats?
Do you use them, or like give advice for people at home who don't have greenhouses and stuff?
Yeah, I use heat mats because I use them outside in my greenhouse where it's currently, 35 degrees. But you don't need them when you're in your house because you're most likely keeping your house somewhere in the 65 to 75 degree temperatures. If it's colder than that, I would suggest using a heat mat or like checking the top of your fridge to make sure that that's warm enough, right? Because that's a really good place.
Okay.
Or near your oven or your wood stove, right? But yeah, you don't need to use a heat mat if you're inside unless your house is colder than about 65 degrees.
And would that also be around the clock, or would that be like timed? Like,
So that's just until your seeds pop, right? And then, so once your seeds reach, oh, that's not a pepper. Once your seeds reach the popping stage, then you can take them off of the heat. They don't need constant heat. And it's actually better for seeds to go through a period of slightly warmer and slightly cooler temperatures than it is for them to be on the heat all the time. That's also one way that your plants might get leggy, is if you have like 75 degree heat mats and you keep your peppers on your 75 degree heat mats all the time, they're gonna be like really sappy growth, that really leggy, long, skinny growth. And it's gonna be a lot harder to harden them off in order to plant them outside. So, and there are some plants, like peppers, that if they experience temperatures below, it's like below 55, like in the 45 to 55 degree range, they'll put out flowers a lot faster and they'll put out more flowers. So it's just a good idea in general to try to mimic nature as much as possible, higher temperatures and lower temperatures. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well thank you for coming to the Seed Talk today. I hope you have learned something and take home some good information and all of your seeds are successful.
Me too.
Thank you.